Hi there, Mark here again with another in the Music Theory for Bass series of video lessons. As always, make sure to check out the other videos on the Talking Bass video YouTube channel. You'll find lessons on all areas of bass playing, and there's at least one new lesson every week. You can also find these lessons along with loads of bass articles, reviews and downloads over at www.talkingbass.net, so check that out. So we've already covered extensions of the triad and the seventh chord, but we've only covered the natural extensions. That's the major ninth, perfect 11th and the major 13th. When we see chord symbols with these extensions, they're always major or perfect unless stated otherwise. So a minor 13 flat 5 chord would still have a major 6th or 13th, not a minor 6th or minor 13th interval, even though it says minor. That's because it's an extension of a minor 7 flat 5 chord, and when we extend the chord, the number 7 is replaced by the extension. So if we want to use other altered extensions like a flat 13 or a sharp 11, then we have to indicate that in the chord, and these numbers come after the basic 7th in the chord symbol. Altered extensions are the parts of chord symbols that make people freak out. You see these giant chords like F sharp 7, flat 9, sharp 11, flat 13 and think, what the hell is that? But really, there's no difference in the way that we construct these chords. You just have to be aware of the basic chord triad and the 7th chord that's being extended. The most common altered extensions are the flat 9, the sharp 11 and the flat 13. I don't class the sharp 5 or flat 5 as an altered extension because they're parts of the basic augmented or diminished triads. This is where it can get a little bit confusing because a sharp 5 note is enharmonically the same as a flat 13 or flat 6. So from a root note of C, the sharp 5 is G sharp and the flat 13 is an A flat. Same note, different spelling. But they are different chords because a sharp 5 is an alteration of the 5th. And so the triad is totally different, whereas the flat 13 is an altered extension to a 7th chord. A chord with a flat 13 could still have the perfect 5th in the chord. A sharp 5 as an augmented 5th, no perfect 5th. Now it'd take forever to go through every permutation of every 7th chord with every altered extension, because there's just so many of them. I'll cover the most common ones, but all you really need to know is with extensions and altered extensions is that you're simply adding notes to any one of the basic core 7th chords. So a C, as an example, a C9 is a C7 chord with a major 9th added, the D. So on C7, add the 9th, C9. A C7 flat 9 would be a C7 chord with the flat 9 or minor 9th added to it instead of the D, so we'd have a D flat. So C9, D, C7 flat 9, the D flat. Now you remember how in previous lessons I've talked about stacking thirds and how extensions are built from the order of 9th, 11th and 13th. So you would think that a 7 flat 13 chord would need the 9th and the 11th present. But if you watch the extensions lesson again, you'll also see that even though that's the theory behind how we arrive at extensions, only the 7th is actually necessary. The extension can be added to a 7th chord on its own, or you can fill all the gaps in with the 9th and the 11th. It all depends on context and voicing and a player's particular style of playing. So a 13 chord can be built as 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 13, or 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 9, 11, 13. But you just have to be careful with randomly adding or filling in extensions because they might not work with what everybody else is playing. So just the same, a C7 flat 13 would be root, 3rd, 5th, flat 7 and then just the flat 13, although other extensions could be added in between. So let's try playing some of these arpeggios. We'll use a dominant 7th chord as the basic 7th chord for building, since that's the most commonly altered chord, and try out the altered extensions in order. So the main alterations available to us are the flat 9, the sharp 9, the sharp 11 and the flat 13. First let's try a C7 flat 9. We have the C7 arpeggio, and then we have the flat 9 or D flat. Now we can play that D flat in the higher or the lower octave because, as I've mentioned before, the order of chord tones is open to suggestion or interpretation. Block chords are voiced in loads of different ways, so if I want smooth voice leading in the arpeggio, I can play the higher extensions down here mixed in with the triad and 7th chord tones. rather than having these big leaps because I'm always sticking to a rigid stacking. Those long 13th chord arpeggios that are presented in the extensions lesson were mainly to show the theory behind the stacking of thirds. This huge big stackings. So for a C7 flat 9 chord, we could actually use the following arpeggio. So the D flat is down here by the root, as opposed to either one's okay though. Now let's try a C7 sharp 9. Now this is an odd chord since we have the major third present in the dominant 7 chord, and the sharp 9 is enharmonically the same as the minor third. So the chord has a minor third and a major third at the same time. But it does work well, and you'll know the sound as the popular Hendrix chord that you get in Foxy Lady and various other tunes. So we have the C, and then we'll play the D sharp here on the same string, then E, next string, G, B flat, and the standard fingering for the C7. So again, you can see it in the accompanying PDF. So we've got C, D sharp, E, G, B flat, C. Okay. Now let's try a C7 sharp 11. So we take the C7 arpeggio, and we just add the sharp 11, which in this case is the F sharp. So we have C, E, F sharp, G, B flat, C. C7 sharp 11. Now let's try a C7 flat 13. So we play the C7 arpeggio, and we add the flat 13, which is the A flat in this lower octave. So we have C, E, G, A flat, B flat, C. So that's C7 flat 13. Okay. Now let's try a few extensions together. So let's try a C7 flat 9 flat 13. So we play the C7 arpeggio, and we add the flat 9, the D flat, and the A flat, both in this lower octave. So C, D flat, E, G, A flat, B flat, and then up to the C. Okay. So now let's try with a different type of 7th chord. Let's try a C major 7 sharp 11. This is a fairly popular chord and implies a Lydian modality for those of you out there that like Lydian scales. So take the major 7 arpeggio and just add the F sharp, the sharp 11 in that lower octave. So we have C, E, F sharp, G, B, C. Okay. Now let's try some altered extensions from a minor 7 chord. So we'll look at the C minor 7 flat 9. So play a C minor 7 arpeggio, and then we add the flat 9, the D flat. We can play it in the upper or lower octave. So here it is in the higher octave, C, E flat, G, B flat, D flat. Or in the lower octave, C, D flat, E flat, G, B flat. Okay. Finally, let's try altering some extensions from a C7 sharp 5. Of course, we already have the A flat or flat 13 present because of the augmented 5th, so we can only add the 9th or 11th alterations. So let's try it in both for good measure. So here's a C7 sharp 5, flat 9, sharp 11. So we take the C7 sharp 5, which has an augmented triad in it, and the flat 7. Then we just add the flat 9, the D flat, and the sharp 11, which is the F sharp. So all together we have C, D flat, E, F sharp, G sharp, B flat, and then the C octave. So that's a C7 sharp 5, flat 9, sharp 11. Now these chords might look scary and a little bit confusing, but the main reason for using them is usually to be found in the melody or improvisation above the chord. The melody of a song may have a flat 9 in order to imply a certain scale or a certain minor key or a certain effect. And when that happens, the alteration is often specified in the harmony, in the chord symbols, because you don't want someone to play a major ninth on a certain instrument to beef up a seventh chord when the melody's blasting out this flat nine loud and clear, or vice versa. You'd get this kind of clash of a minor second, and that's the kind of clash that instigates riots, so look out. These altered extensions can also be used to outline a particular scale in the harmony without any melodic association. So a C minor 11 flat 9 flat 13 chord provides a pretty strong outline of a scale. We have a minor 7 chord of C, E flat, G, B flat. Then we've got the natural extensions of a perfect 11th, which is an F, a D flat, flat 9, and the flat 13, which is an A flat. And if we arrange all these notes in order, we get a complete scale of C, D flat, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, which is known as a Phrygian scale. So the chord is heavily implying a particular scale for use in the melodic material. The more notes that are specified in the chord, the more we imply a certain scale for the melody. Now, the reverse of this is also true in that you can build chords from scales, and certain scales will dictate certain extensions and accidentals. Now, the harmonic minor scale is a perfect example as one of the scales that we've already covered. If we use the degrees of that scale to create a seventh chord and its extensions, we end up with a minor triad or minor major 7 chord as the tonic triad or seventh chord. And if we use it as the basis for the extensions, we end up with the major 9th, the perfect 11th, and the minor 13th as the extensions. So we would use a minor major 11 flat 13 chord as the fully extended tonic chord derived from the harmonic minor scale. There'll be a couple of lessons devoted to this building of scales, building of chords from scales coming up shortly, so don't worry too much about it for now. Now, you might see many different chord symbols associated with these altered extensions and all the basic natural extensions too. That's because different people have different ways of writing the same chord. Sometimes specific voicings or extension stacks might be implied by using the add term to the symbol. Now, in the added note chord lesson, I showed how we can add notes to a basic triad, but this can also be done to a seventh chord with extensions. A C major 7 add 13 will be specifically asking for a C major 7 chord with only the 13th, the A, added. The 9th and the 11th would be avoided. A C7 add sharp 11 would be asking for a C7 chord with the F sharp added and no 9th. Now, these added note terms are often unnecessary because most of the time musicians generally have their own way of voicing chords, and experience kind of dictates what extensions to include or avoid. Now, you might also see a slash symbol used in chord symbols with extensions, such as C7/9/13. And again, this is just a way of asking for certain extensions to be included. So just keep an open mind when reading chord symbols, because they're simply a means of passing on musical information. Some chords are almost impossible to write in chord symbol form because they might just be a consequence of the interaction of a bunch of melodic lines. In a lot of older polyphonic music, particularly stuff from the Baroque and classical periods, harmony is implied by these independent moving melodies, and that can be all messed up in terms of chord symbols because the harmony changes so often and the melodies might be using accented passing notes and suspensions that influence how we might translate them. So always remember that chord symbols are not the last word in how to look at harmony of a piece, far from it. So try to relax a bit with these chords. Once you grasp the concept of just sticking notes onto a basic seventh chord, these altered extensions should seem a little less daunting. It's pointless just playing through every combination as a practice because you'll be spending hours and hours and hours on it for no reason. You need to be able to recognise these chords on the fly and just isolate the required notes as needed. So if you see a G7 flat 9 sharp 9 flat 13, you instantly think G7 and then just stick the flat 9 sharp 9 and flat 13 onto it. So try to work on simplifying these extended chords in this way by just removing any extensions beyond the seventh. This can help in dealing with these chords from a bass line perspective, especially walking bass lines. For instance, if you see the progression A minor 11, D minor 7 flat 5 flat 9, G7 flat 9 flat 13, C major 9, we can simplify those chords in our mind to A minor 7, D minor 7 flat 5, G7, C major 7. The chord qualities are still intact and we can play a line through them without worrying about all the complicated stuff on top. Remember the flat 5 has to remain because the 5th is a bit part of the basic chord triad. A sharp 5 would also have to remain. And of course, if you want to play any scalar type lines or notes outside of that core 7th chord, then you're going to need to address the extensions and alterations. But I'll pursue this simplifying of chords more thoroughly in an upcoming lesson on bass chords. So I'll leave it there for now and let all this information sink in. Remember, as always, to visit talkingbass.net for more goodies and all the lesson materials over there to download. And if you subscribe to the Talking Bass newsletter, you can download the free scale reference manual, which is full of scales. So check that out. Okay, see you later.